Thank you both for being with us. And Alan, President Trump listed your name on a press release of his, quote, Senate trial counsel. You've said that you're not, quote, a full-fledged member of his legal team. So which is it?
Both. I am a member of the legal team. I'm making what could be the most important argument on the floor of the Senate, namely that even if everything that is alleged by the House managers is proven or taken as true, they would not rise to the level of an impeachable offense. I will be paraphrasing the successful argument made by Justice Benjamin Curtis in the trial of Andrew Johnson back in the 1860s, where he argued that the framers intended for impeachable conduct only to be criminal-like conduct or conduct that is prohibited by the criminal law. Yeah.
I mean, aren't what you're really doing, Alan, is trying to sort of elevate yourself beyond being a lawyer as sort of a neutral expert? But you're just a lawyer, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're just a lawyer representing a client.
I'm just a lawyer. I've done this a dozen times. I've been of counsel in many cases solely on the constitutional issue. That is, I present the constitutional issue. I'm not involved in the day-to-day issues.
But you haven't argued on the floor of the Senate dozens of times or a dozen times.
No, I actually was on the floor of the Senate once on behalf of Senator Alan Cranston many years ago.
Okay, but in this case,
very few people have argued.
I want to make this clear because I'm not seeing this clearly, Alan. Who hired you?
I was asked by the president's defense team to become of counsel on the specific issue of the criteria, the constitutional criteria for impeachment. That's a very important issue. I will be making that argument as an advocate, not as an expert witness. I will be advocating against impeachment of this president based on the constitutional criteria in the Constitution, the framers' debates, the Federalist Papers, the history of the three prior impeachment cases, the scholarly arguments that have been made on all sides. I will be presenting a very strong argument. If you want a prelude of my argument, read the great speech of Justice Benjamin Curtis, who, remember, was the Supreme Court justice who dissented in Dred Scott. And he made the successful argument in front of the Senate that in order for a president to be impeached, and Johnson was impeached on charges that didn't include criminal conduct, he argued successfully to the Senate that criminal-like conduct is required. That argument prevailed. I will be making that argument as a lawyer on behalf of the president's defense team against impeachment. That's my role. It's very clear. I've done it before. It's a common role that lawyers play to be specialized lawyers of counsel on particular constitutional issues, and that's what I'll be doing.
I mean, I think of it like special teams on a football team then, perhaps. You're still on the team. Very important
That's
to note.
fine.
Jeffrey,
I'm the kicker. I'm the kicker,
right,
and I can win the
you can win the
field goal that wins the game.
That's right. Jeffrey.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think we're playing semantic games to a certain extent, but I think we should be very clear. What Alan is doing is making an argument against witnesses, because what Alan is saying, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that even if everything that the Democrats allege is true, there's still no impeachable offense here. So that means there's no need for witnesses. Isn't that right?
No, that's partly right. I mean, if a person is indicted on something that's not a crime, you don't call witnesses. But the House still has the ability to go back and call witnesses, reframe the articles of impeachment in order to set out impeachable offenses.
We're only doing one impeachment at a time.
Should there be fact witnesses in a Senate trial, Alan?
Well, that's a matter for the Senate. The Constitution doesn't speak to that issue. It just simply says the Senate is the sole determinant of guilt. They will have to determine whether to call witnesses. The one thing the Constitution would require is if witnesses are called on one side, they have to be called on the other side. What I would think is wait until after all the opening arguments are made. Let's see if witnesses are called for, and if they are, the trial will take a much longer time because the Democrats will call John Bolton. The president will invoke executive privilege. It will have to go to the courts. The courts will resolve it. The reason the Democrats didn't call John Bolton,
but Alan, if I may, but on executive privilege, many of the conversations, the relevant ones John Bolton had about Mick Mulvaney, about Gordon Sondland with Fiona Hill, they were not with the president. There are many things he can testify to that aren't governed by executive privilege.
And the courts will determine that. The courts may determine that he has to testify, and question by question, executive privilege can be invoked and tested. All I'm saying is if that happens, the trial will be delayed. I don't think we're in a position now to know whether witnesses will be called. If my argument succeeds, if my argument prevails that there is no impeachable offense charge, Mr. Toobin is right. Then there is no need for witnesses. If my argument fails, then perhaps witnesses would have to be called.
And I think that's the key point, is that Allen's argument is not just against impeachment, it's against witnesses. And you can be sure that's how it will be used by his fellow Republican, by the
I agree with that.
Republican.
I agree with that. If my argument succeeds, there's no need for witnesses. Indeed, there's no need for even arguments, any further arguments. If the House charges do not include impeachable offenses, that's really the end of the matter, and the Senate should vote to acquit or even to dismiss. Now, that motion is not going to be made. It was made in the Clinton case. Remember, I was involved in the Clinton case. I was a witness for Clinton. I consulted with the Clinton team. I was also expressed very strong views about the Nixon impeachment. I've been consistent in my views on impeachment since the 1970s. That's more than I can say for some of my other academic colleagues who seem to be making their arguments based on partisan considerations. I'm a liberal Democrat.
Let's talk about
making
Clinton
this
for
argument in a nonpartisan way. Yeah.
Isn't the real point of why you opposed Bill Clinton's impeachment is that it was not an abuse of presidential power to lie about Monica Lewinsky under oath?
No, absolutely
and isn't that
not.
The well, let me finish. Isn't the point of impeachment to police a president's power, not just any wrongdoing, but the fact that you or I cannot withhold aid from Ukraine. Only a president can do that, and that's why it can be an abuse of power if he does it for improper purposes. Bill Clinton was not abusing presidential power.
That's not the reason I opposed his impeachment. I opposed his impeachment because it didn't allege an impeachable offense. It didn't allege a high crime. It alleged a low crime, a crime much like the